I live with 𝗟𝗘𝗞𝗗𝗚𝗡 at 𝗟𝗘𝗞𝗗𝗡𝗡 Monastery. So when this conference was happening, I didn't know anything about it. And he asked me to come up to help behind the scenes. So I said, okay, not knowing anything about what the conference topic was. So I'm only here as a worker, to help. But then doing all the work, I know what they say, I know a little bit about Sixth Dalai Lama. I know brief history, I know some of his poetry, I don't know a lot. So in preparing for the conference, I start studying all of the abstracts that all the students have written and all the professors and researchers. And I realize there's so much more interesting history there. So now I'm very excited. And I think that having all these different scholars, both spiritual scholars and professors in the academic world and the spiritual world come together to share knowledge is a great opportunity for the kind of worldly study and spiritual study to realize how they can work together to have a deeper understanding of reality and of our history and of our legacy. So it's very exciting, and I've been to 𝗚𝗎𝗧𝗦𝗡𝗡 3 times now. This is my 3rd visit up to 𝗚𝗎𝗧𝗦𝗡. It's quite a beautiful place, and for them to celebrate 𝗟𝗚𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 is so important, right? Because he's like a jewel of 𝗚𝗎𝗧𝗏. And as Rinpoche was saying, as many of the speakers were saying, he isn't well celebrated here as much as he is in Tibet and in the West and by scholars all over. So to bring not just his poems, but his legacy, his history, the cultural importance back to 𝗚𝗎𝗏 and to the Munyul people, I think is very, very exciting. And so I'm just a small part. I'm just behind the scene worker, But I'm not a scholar anymore, However, of these conference participants, one of them was my teacher at Harvard. I went to Harvard before I became a monk. So I know her, Janet Gyatso, very wonderful professor. And then some of the other presenters are my classmates from Harvard. So we have great scholars from all around the world. Some of them I know. So it's like a reunion, with an American little reunion here in 𝗚𝗎𝗏. So I have a lot of joy meeting new friends, meeting old friends. And I think this conference is a great opportunity for the Munyul people and also for the international community to develop a deeper understanding of Tzewang Gyatso and his role in the cultural history of Tibet and the Munyul people.
There was also a book released, a collection of his works of the 6th Dalai Lama. How do you think this will help in the cultural and social studies for the future?
Well, the really nice thing about this book that's being released, there's 2 books. There's one book that's just a collection of his works, right? And you can already get some of those, but they're not edited. So what they've done with this collection is they're editing them and making sure they're very perfectly correct. And there's some discrepancy. There's some people that say, oh, these are his collected works and it's a very small volume. Then there's others that say, oh no, there's 400 volumes like this, So what they're doing is they're going through all of the works and they're correcting them, making sure there's no grammatical mistakes, no errors, and then putting them all together. So for all the scholars and the devotees, it's a chance to have everything in one place, And this is still Tibetan language right now. But then we're working to translate them into English and into other languages as well. So all of that will help the whole international community of both scholars and devotees. So I think it's great to have a definitive edition. Because before you have a little bit here, a little bit there, all over the place. Having everything together is really powerful. It makes it easier to study, easier to practice. That's the important part of all of our study, right? As Buddhists, we say we need to study, but the reason we study is to live a more meaningful life, right? So we study these texts not just to get intellectual knowledge. Intellectual knowledge is fine, but it's very, very small. What you need is heart knowledge, spiritual knowledge. So if you have everything all mixed up, it's very hard to do. When you have it all in one place, then it makes it easier so you can study, you can think about it, and then you can meditate on the meaning, and you can develop a realization. So I think having this book released, and then also Rinpoche Rinpoche's book, isn't the collected works, the one that they were announcing today. He is talking about the 6th Dalai Lama. So it's looking at the collected works and then having some discussion about him. So having more conversation like this just makes practice and study easier for everyone, and that is nothing but benefit for everyone.
Okay, so from tomorrow onwards, the technical session is going to start.
Yes.
So on the technical session, what topics are going to be covered on Sangha?
Oh, so there are many technical sessions. There's over 24 presenters, right? So a lot of them, especially the scholars, are looking at the works and they're trying to do intertextual studies. So looking at these poems, for instance, we know everyone agrees the 6th Dalai Lama wrote these poems. Then these poems, some people say he wrote, some people say he didn't write. So you compare the poems and you say, what can we learn by comparing them? So there's a lot of sessions looking at the poetry itself. And then, as mentioned today, the official biography, and then there's the secret biography and hidden biography. And some say that he died of a fever when he was traveling near Amdo, and others say, no, he disappeared, but then he went to Mongolia, other places. So looking at these different biographies and trying to see what can we find out what the truth is, and maybe the truth isn't one thing. Sometimes when you have spiritual faith, the truth exists in more than one place at once. As Yanda Rinpoche was saying, what we have the karma to see with our senses isn't always the truth. Sometimes there's hidden meaning. Sometimes there is meaning that is secret. You know, so a lot of the conference participants are going to be looking at the different biographies. They're going to be looking at the different poems, and they're going to be looking at the kind of the discrepancy in the stories, and to see if we can find one thing that makes sense coming together like that.
And as the technical session is the important thing,
Yeah.
so what outcome do we expect from this technical session, this
I mean,
conference?
the only outcome really is that there are so many scholars around the world, both Tibetan scholars, Indian scholars, and international scholars that are looking into this work, but they're all separate. So if you have them all come together to share your knowledge, then, you know, for me, haven't done any study, I just get nothing but benefit, right? But for maybe you studied one thing, you studied something else, now you come together and you help each other. So the real thing is to create a community of scholars, and that makes the scholarship stronger, right? Instead of working in isolation, we work together. So by bringing all these scholars to one place, you know, then that makes the scholarship across the board stronger and more important. And the fact that it's here in Muntawang is just really special, you know, it makes it more powerful. But the real goal, I think, is to have all these scholars talk to each other. And so I can learn what your scholarship is, which maybe isn't the same as mine, but it affects my scholarship. And like this, we work together, you know?
Thank you very much.
Yeah.